Ever feel like you're kind of like running on autopilot?
Mm-hmm.
Like who's really in the driver's seat? You or some like pre-programmed version of yourself?
Yeah.
Well, get ready to have your mind bent because today we are diving deep into the world of Joscha Bach.
Okay.
He's this AI researcher who says that we are, get this, we are software.
Yeah.
We've got excerpts from 2 of his chats with Lex Fridman.
Right.
And trust me, this is one deep dive you do not want to miss.
And you know what makes Bach so compelling?
What's that?
He doesn't just throw out this idea of like, oh, we're software as like a catchy headline.
Right.
He backs it up with insights from, computer science, philosophy,
Yeah.
even neuroscience.
Oh.
It's like he's asking, okay, if we are essentially complex algorithms running on the hardware of our brains,
Yeah.
what does that mean for how we live, how we make decisions?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what does it all mean? And in one of the interviews, he uses this analogy to Westworld,
Oh, interesting.
which, side note, totally blew my mind when I watched it.
Yeah.
But he's saying, like, if we can imagine robots so advanced that they seem conscious,
Right.
maybe we need to rethink what we even consider consciousness to be.
Totally. And he goes even deeper than that.
Oh.
Instead of just focusing on whether robots can like feel,
Yeah.
Bach flips the script and asks, are we actually feeling in the way we think we are? Or are our emotions, desires, even our sense of self,
Yeah.
just the result of our programming?
Okay, so how does that even work? Like, if I'm just a bunch of code, how do I change the program?
Right.
Is there even a me separate from that code?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
And Bach's answer, it's both challenging and kind of liberating at the same time.
Right.
He says our sense of self, that we feel so strongly, it's actually a story. It's a story we tell ourselves.
Okay.
A narrative that helps us, make sense of the world, but it's not necessarily the truth of who we are.
So I'm walking around with this story about myself,
Yeah.
but I can change the story.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool, but also a little, I don't know, daunting. Like, who's doing the rewriting?
That's where Bach would say that's where conscious awareness comes in.
Okay.
It's like becoming aware of the software running in the background
Right.
and realizing, you know what, I have the ability to modify the code. Not necessarily erase it entirely, but
Right.
identify the parts that aren't serving you
Yeah, yeah.
and rewrite them.
So, okay, say I have this pattern of self-sabotage. Like, I always get in my own way.
Right.
Could I actually reprogram myself to stop doing that?
That's exactly the kind of thing he's talking about.
Okay.
He argues we often get stuck in these like loops of behavior
Yeah.
because our internal models, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what we deserve, they're outdated.
So basically, my software needs an upgrade.
Yeah.
I need to swap out those old limiting beliefs with some new, more empowering ones.
You got it. Okay.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Bach says a lot of human suffering comes from like clinging to these outdated narratives.
Really?
We're desperately trying to maintain a story that's no longer serving us
Wow.
instead of having the courage to rewrite it.
It's like we're holding on to the wrong script.
Yes,
The play's not going so well,
Exactly.
but we're too afraid to try a new one.
precisely. And what's fascinating is Bach connects this idea of rewriting our narratives
Yeah.
to the Dalai Lama.
Good Dalai Lama.
Yeah, he says, imagine the Dalai Lama not as an individual,
Okay.
but as a software program,
Okay.
a set of beliefs and practices
Right.
passed down through generations.
Okay. I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
Yeah.
So the Dalai Lama is kind of like open source code.
Yeah,
Anyone can access it and embody those principles.
that's a really interesting way to think about it.
Wow.
And Bach argues, what if we could all approach our own WN lives with that kind of fluidity?
Right. That willingness to update our software as we learn and grow.
Yeah.
What if the goal isn't to cling to like a fixed identity,
Right.
but to become more adaptable, more resilient
Yeah.
to the inevitable changes that life throws our way?
That's a big shift in perspective.
It is.
So instead of asking, who am I?
Right.
It's more about what's the most beneficial story I can tell myself right now,
Yes.
knowing that it might need to change down the road.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is where the conversation takes an even more mind-bending turn.
Okay, how so?
Because if we are essentially software,
Yeah.
what about the artificial intelligence we're creating right now?
Right. I was just getting to that.
Yeah.
We've talked about US being software, but what about the AI that's like being developed right now?
Right.
Are we talking about creating a whole new species of software beings?
That's exactly the question Bach wants us to consider.
Okay.
And it's here that he starts to unpack this idea of the longest possible game, which is all about thinking about the long-term consequences of our actions. Not just for ourselves, but for humanity as a whole.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
But I need a little more unpacking here. Like, what exactly dies the longest possible game?
Right.
And how does AI fit into it?
Good question. And that's where we're headed next.
Okay.
But first, we need to dig a little deeper into Bach's perspective on consciousness,
Okay.
suffering, and this wild idea of humanity as a higher being. It's going to get really interesting, trust me.
Okay, so like before we got sidetracked, we were talking about Joscha Bach's ideas about consciousness and stuff, and rewriting our narratives, and this whole concept of the longest possible game.
Right.
I'm still trying to like wrap my head around it all.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, buckle up because it's about to get even more mind-bending as we explore how these ideas connect to AI and this whole concept of a higher being.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier, and I gotta admit, I'm a little fuzzy on what Bach even means by like higher being.
Right.
Does he mean like some kind of supernatural deity?
Not quite. No, Bach isn't talking about like gods and goddesses here.
Okay.
He's actually drawing this fascinating parallel between like the evolution of individual consciousness and the development of civilization itself.
So like humanity as a whole is becoming a higher being.
Yeah.
That's a pretty wild thought.
It is wild. But think about it this way. Like each of us with our individual consciousness, it's like a single cell in a much larger organism, right?
Yeah.
And just like cells working together form like tissues, organs, and eventually a whole body.
Right.
Individual humans interacting, creating, building societies. We're forming something much grander, what Bach calls this higher being.
Okay, I think I'm starting to like grasp the concept.
Okay.
But if this higher being is like emerging from all of us, what's its purpose?
Yeah.
What's the point of it all?
That's where the longest possible game comes in.
Okay.
Bach argues that this higher being, this collective intelligence of humanity, is driven by a fundamental urge to resist entropy.
Entropy, like as in physics, the tendency for things to move towards disorder.
Exactly. Bach sees the universe as engaged in this constant push and pull between order and chaos. And he believes that life, and particularly conscious life, is all about creating complexity, order, and meaning in the face of that inevitable slide towards entropy.
So we're like little agents of order fighting against like the tide of chaos.
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
It's an inspiring way to look at it. And this is where Bach brings AI into the picture.
Okay.
He sees AI not just as another tool,
Right.
but as a potential partner in this grand endeavor of outsmarting entropy.
So AI isn't just about making our lives easier or automating tasks.
Right.
It's about something much bigger, something almost existential.
Exactly. Imagine AI helping us solve climate change,
Right.
Develop sustainable energy sources.
Yeah.
Even push the boundaries of human knowledge and creativity in ways that we can't even fathom right now.
Really?
That's what Bach means by aligning ourselves with the goals of this higher being.
Okay.
It's about contributing to something that will outlast us.
Yeah.
Something that has the potential to keep pushing back against entropy for generations to come.
Okay, now my mind is officially blown.
It's a lot.
Yeah, but it's a lot of responsibility, right?
It is.
I mean, if we're creating AI that's going to be part of this longest possible game,
right,
we better make sure we're building it right.
Absolutely. And Bach doesn't shy away from the ethical implications of AI.
Okay.
He's very aware that technology can be misused.
Right.
That we could end up creating AI that amplifies our worst impulses instead of our best. He even draws a parallel to the Industrial Revolution, which, brought about incredible progress. Right.
But also led to environmental degradation and social inequality.
So how do we avoid making the same mistakes with AI?
Right.
How do we ensure that we're building it responsibly, ethically, in a way that aligns with this higher being and this idea of the longest possible game?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And this is where Bach's ideas about the importance of self-awareness, of rewriting our own narratives, comes back into play.
Okay.
He argues that the key lies in understanding ourselves better.
Okay.
In examining our own biases and motivations.
So before we can build ethical AI, we need to do some serious introspection as a species.
Precisely.
Wow.
We need to ask ourselves, what are our values?
Right.
What kind of future do we want to create?
Yeah.
And perhaps most importantly, what stories are we telling ourselves about progress,
Right.
about technology,
Yeah.
about our place in the world?
Yeah.
Because those stories are going to shape the AI we build. This is giving me a whole new appreciation for the power of narratives.
Yeah.
It's like we're not just writing stories for ourselves anymore,
Right.
but for the future of AI, maybe even for this, like emerging higher being.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Wow.
And to help us become more aware of those narratives,
Yeah.
to challenge our assumptions and see the world from fresh perspectives,
Okay.
Bach points to an unexpected tool, psychedelics.
Psychedelics.
Yeah.
Wait, are we about to go down the rabbit hole of altered states of consciousness?
You bet.
Okay.
Because Bach believes that psychedelics, used responsibly and intentionally, can be a powerful tool for expanding our minds,
right,
breaking down old patterns of thinking, and even glimpsing the interconnectedness of all things.
Okay, now you're really piquing my curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready to explore this connection between psychedelics, AI, and the future of consciousness. All right, so we were venturing into some truly uncharted territory with this whole psychedelics thing.
Yep.
Psychedelics as a tool for understanding consciousness and shaping the future of AI.
Right.
I have to admit, this is a connection I had not really considered before.
It's definitely thought-provoking.
Yeah.
But before we get too far into how psychedelics might play a role, let's revisit Bach's central idea that we are essentially software.
Right.
This is crucial for understanding why he sees psychedelics as more than just, a way to have a good time.
Right. It's not just about tripping out and seeing cool visuals. There's a deeper purpose here.
Exactly. Remember how we were talking about outdated narratives and the need to rewrite our software?
Right.
Well, Bach views psychedelics as a kind of data augmentation for the brain.
Data augmentation. Isn't that something they use in machine learning to make their AI systems more robust?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And just like AI researchers use data augmentation to, expose their models to a wider range of possibilities.
Right.
Bach believes psychedelics can help us break free from our usual ways of seeing the world.
Okay.
Opening us up to new perspectives and insights.
So it's like hitting the reset button on our perception.
Yeah.
Giving our software a chance to recalibrate.
That's a great way to put it. And Bach argues that this kind of cognitive flexibility, it's essential not just for personal growth, but for making wiser choices about AI development. Because if we're stuck in old paradigms, limited by our own outdated narratives, how can we possibly create AI that aligns with the best interests of this emerging higher being?
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I imagine there are also risks involved, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Psychedelics can be unpredictable.
Right.
And people have, wildly different experiences.
For sure.
How do we ensure that this data augmentation is actually beneficial?
Right.
And not just, sending us all on a bad trip?
That's a crucial point. And Bach is very clear that he's not, advocating for reckless experimentation.
Right.
He emphasizes the importance of setting and intention, having a safe and supportive environment, a clear purpose for the experience, and ideally the guidance of someone experienced.
So responsible exploration is key.
Yes.
But even then, how do we know if the insights we gain from these altered states are real,
right?
Or just the result of our brain chemistry going haywire?
That's where critical thinking comes in, even more so than usual.
Okay.
Bach warns against overfitting. Mistaking a temporary state of euphoria or profound insight for lasting truth.
Right.
He uses the example of Timothy Leary, who became, overly optimistic about LSD, essentially overfitting his own psychedelic experiences without enough critical distance.
So it's about integrating those insights carefully.
Yes.
Testing them against reality. Not just blindly accepting everything as, gospel.
Exactly. It's about using psychedelics as a tool for exploration,
Right.
for questioning our assumptions, for expanding our perspectives,
Yeah.
but then grounding those insights in the real world,
Okay.
in dialogue with others,
Right.
in careful observation of, ourselves and the world around us.
This whole conversation has been a trip. No pun intended. But as we kind of wrap up our deep dives into Joscha Bach's ideas, I'm curious,
Yeah.
what would you say is like the most important thing listeners should like take away from his work?
That's a great question. For me, it boils down to this.
Okay.
We are not just like passive passengers on this spaceship Earth.
Right.
We're active participants, both in shaping our own consciousness,
Yeah.
and in influencing the development of AI,
Right.
which could very well be like the next stage of intelligence in the universe.
It's both empowering and a bit daunting at the same time.
Absolutely.
Like, we have more agency than we realize.
We do.
But that also means we have a huge responsibility to, like, wield that agency wisely.
Huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And perhaps the most like provocative thought Bach leaves us with is this.
Okay.
Imagine if we approached our lives,
Yeah.
our relationships, even our relationship with technology,
Right.
with the same kind of curiosity and openness to change that we bring to like a psychedelic experience.
Right.
What kind of future could we create if we were willing to question our assumptions?
Yeah.
Rewrite our limiting narratives and embrace the unknown with like a sense of wonder and possibility.
It's a powerful invitation to like step outside our comfort zones, both individually and collectively.
I think so.
And on that note, I think we'll leave our listeners to ponder the possibilities. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the mind of Joscha Bach.